The office was dimly lit, the kind of place where secrets seemed to linger in the air like a thick fog. Elon Musk, the world's wealthiest man, sat in a leather chair, his posture casual, but his mind anything but. His fingers tapped nervously against the armrest, a rhythm that echoed the unease gnawing at him. He had been summoned here, to the heart of Washington, D.C., to the most secure government facility in the country, the Secret Service headquarters. The letter that had brought him here had been cryptic. No details, just one line, "Your expertise is needed." It felt too vague. Too mysterious. And as Elon sat there, the unsettling thought kept repeating in his mind, why me? His gaze wandered over the polished wood paneling of the room, as if searching for answers that were hidden in the shadows. He wasn't used to being in this position, uncertain, out of control. After all, he was Elon Musk, the visionary behind Tesla, SpaceX, and countless innovations that had reshaped the world. He was used to calling the shots, not sitting here, waiting for someone else to explain why he'd been pulled into the deepest corners of the government's secrets. Mr. Musk? The voice that broke through his thoughts was sharp, professional, but not warm. Elon looked up to see a tall man in a dark suit standing in the doorway, his expression impassive. The agent's eyes were piercing, scrutinizing him with a calm intensity. "Follow me," the agent said, his voice carrying a tone that left no room for negotiation. Elon stood up slowly, brushing off the unease that crawled up his spine. He had no choice but to follow. The agent led him down a narrow hallway, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The walls here were colder, more sterile. Each turn they took felt like another step into unknown territory. The facility was far more expansive than Elon had expected, high-tech systems hidden behind closed doors, security checkpoints that made him feel like an outsider in a place built for secrecy. As they reached the final door, the agent stopped and turned to Elon. His expression remained unreadable. "Once you enter this room, there's no turning back," the agent warned. It wasn't a threat, but a statement. And it sent a chill down Elon's spine. The door creaked open, and as they entered, Elon's eyes widened slightly. The room before him was nothing like he had imagined. High-tech monitors and complex machinery lined the walls, casting an eerie glow on the faces of those present. Men and women in dark suits were huddled around screens, their focus absolute. It was clear they were working on something that required complete secrecy and precision. But it wasn't the technology that caught Elon's attention, it was the feeling that hit him the hardest. This was a place where everything was monitored, controlled, where nothing was left to chance. The air was thick with tension, and the walls seemed to close in even tighter. "Mr. Musk, please have a seat," a voice interrupted his thoughts. Elon turned to see another agent, older, with a salt and pepper beard, sitting at the head of the room. His gaze was cool, calculating. "We've been expecting you." Elon took the seat across from him, but his mind raced. "What is this about? Why me?" His curiosity had been piqued, but he also felt a growing sense of unease, something that he couldn't quite shake. "Mr. Musk, we've been monitoring your progress in the field of AI, autonomous vehicles, and space exploration for some time now," the agent said, his voice steady but businesslike. "And there's something we need you to see. Something you might not know about. Something that could change the course of history." Elon's heart rate quickened, his instincts on high alert. He'd dealt with government agencies before, but this was different. There was no formal meeting or friendly introduction. No mention of what he could gain. Just this sense of urgency that hung in the air. "What are you talking about?" Elon asked, his voice steady despite the storm of questions swirling in his mind. The agent leaned forward, a slight smirk playing at the corners of his lips. "We need your help, Mr. Musk. There are projects, technologies, systems, things you've never even imagined. Things that have been under development for decades. And we believe you're the only one who can help us finish what was started." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Elon's mind flashed back to the many projects he had worked on, revolutionary things, things that had always been ahead of their time. But this was something new. Something unknown. Why me? Elon asked again, his voice edged with suspicion. Why not someone else? Someone already in government? The agent's eyes glinted for a moment before he answered. Because what we're asking you to do goes beyond anything your companies have ever done. It's about the future of humanity itself. And we need you to be part of it. Elon's thoughts were racing. He had always prided himself on being ahead of the curve, on taking risks no one else dared. But this? This was different. This was a whole new level of secrecy, a whole new level of control. And yet, there was something about the offer that tugged at him. A part of him, the part that had always believed in shaping the future, wondered if this was the opportunity he had been waiting for. But it also felt like a trap. A very carefully laid trap. So, what exactly are you asking me to do? Elon finally asked, his voice steady, but his mind still churning with questions. The agent didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, unmarked folder. He slid it across the table, and for the first time, Elon felt the weight of what he was about to see. You'll find out soon enough, the agent said. As Elon reached for the folder, a sudden sense of unease washed over him. He had always trusted his instincts, and right now, every fiber of his being was telling him that something big, something world-changing, was on the verge of being revealed. But whether it would be the dawn of a new era or a disaster waiting to happen, only time would tell. And with that, Elon Musk opened the folder, stepping further into a world he was never meant to see. Elon Musk had never been one to dwell on his past. It was always about the future, the next big idea, the next challenge, the next step toward making humanity a multiplanetary species. But as he sat in that cold, sterile room, with the folder in his hands and the weight of the Secret Service's words hanging over him, his mind couldn't help but wander back to where it all began. He leaned back in his chair, the hard leather creaking under him, and closed his eyes for just a moment. The memories flooded back. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon had always been different. From a young age, he was fascinated with technology, the kind that made people go, "How did you even think of that?" At age 12, he had already taught himself computer programming, creating and selling his first video game, Blaster, for a grand total of $500. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was proof that the kid who couldn't fit in anywhere, who was often bullied for his odd ideas, had something special. But it wasn't just the tech that had shaped him. It was the relentless drive that came from his father, Elon Musk, a wealthy, yet distant man who had a reputation for being controlling. Despite his accomplishments, Elon was emotionally unavailable, and Elon's relationship with him was strained, to say the least. His mother, May, was the opposite, nurturing, supportive, always encouraging Elon to follow his passions. But even her patience had limits, especially when Elon would pour every ounce of energy into his work, leaving little time for anything else. Growing up, Elon had struggled with a deep sense of loneliness. He had a few friends here and there, but it wasn't until he moved to Canada at 17 to attend Queen's University that he felt a glimmer of hope. The move was an escape, a chance to find himself outside of the shadow of his father. Canada, and later the United States, were where he began to forge the path that would eventually lead him to create PayPal, Tesla, and SpaceX. But despite his success, a sense of emptiness lingered. Elon had always thought that success would solve everything, that if he could just push the boundaries of what was possible, he would finally feel whole. But the higher he climbed, the more isolated he became. His personal life was chaotic, punctuated by failed marriages and strained friendships. People often spoke of his genius, his work ethic, but few truly understood the cost. Few understood the loneliness that came with carrying the weight of the future on your shoulders. And it wasn't just his personal life that suffered. his companies had also gone through moments of peril. Tesla, at one point, was on the brink of bankruptcy, and SpaceX had suffered multiple failed launches, nearly derailing his dream of making life multiplanetary. But through it all, Elon had pushed forward. He had no choice. The future, his future, depended on it. Yet, as he sat there, alone in the sterile room of the Secret Service headquarters, the weight of his past began to settle over him. Everything that had brought him to this point, the drive, the ambition, the willingness to risk it all, now seemed to take on a new meaning. He wasn't just here because of his technical expertise. He wasn't just here because of his accomplishments. He was here because he was a man who had pushed himself to the limits, who had broken down barriers and challenged the status quo. But in doing so, he had unknowingly made himself a target. A man who, while he was busy changing the world, had failed to realize the world was changing him. The door to the room opened, pulling him from his thoughts. The agent from earlier stepped inside, holding a tablet in his hand. "Elon," the agent said, his tone soft but serious. "We need you to understand something important. This is bigger than any one of us. What we're asking of you isn't just about advancing technology, it's about protecting humanity." Elon blinked, his mind still wrapped around the weight of the past. But the urgency in the agent's voice pulled him back into the present. "What do you mean?" Elon asked, his voice steady, though his mind was racing. "I'm just a businessman. An inventor. I've never been involved with anything government-related." The agent nodded slowly, as if he'd anticipated the question. "You're more involved than you think. And it's not just about the tech, Elon. It's about the implications of that tech. The world we live in is changing, and there are forces out there who will use it for reasons we can't control. You're already part of this whether you know it or not." Elon leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "And what does that have to do with me? What exactly is it that you need me to do?" The agent took a deep breath. "You've created technologies that could alter the balance of power, AI, autonomous vehicles, space exploration. But there are things you don't know. Things that have been kept from the public. And we believe you're the only person who can help us uncover them." For a moment, Elon was silent. His mind raced with possibilities, his instincts pushing him to keep asking questions. But something in the agent's demeanor told him this wasn't just another conspiracy theory. This was real. And it was dangerous. "You're talking about government secrets," Elon said, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "What kind of secrets?" The agent didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slid the tablet toward Elon. On the screen, a series of images flashed, images of highly advanced technology, blueprints, and strange, cryptic notes that appeared to be related to SpaceX, Tesla, and other projects Elon had been involved in. "This is what you're really dealing with," the agent said. "This isn't just about innovation. It's about the future of humanity, and those who will do anything to control it." Elon's heart raced as he scanned the screen. He saw things he didn't recognize, things that weren't part of any project he had ever worked on. And in that moment, the pieces began to fall into place. He wasn't just here because of his innovations. He was here because someone, somewhere, had been watching him for years. Watching his every move. And now, it seemed they had a purpose for him. "You want me to help you stop this," Elon said, his voice quieter than usual. "Whatever it is." The agent nodded. "You'll find out soon enough. But be warned, Mr. Musk," he said, leaning in slightly. "Once you're involved, there's no going back." Elon's mind whirred, trying to process what he had just seen. The images on the tablet were haunting, cryptic blueprints filled with foreign symbols and designs he couldn't quite comprehend. It wasn't just the high-tech components or the advanced concepts that struck him, it was the unmistakable sense of something wrong about it all. The secrecy, the layers of hidden intentions, the vastness of it, it felt like a trap, a puzzle with pieces he wasn't sure he wanted to fit together. He sat back in his chair, staring at the screen, his heart thumping in his chest. The agent across from him waited, watching him carefully. Elon could feel the weight of the moment, the pressure to understand, to decide whether to walk away or step further into a world of shadows. "What is this?" Elon asked again, the words coming out more slowly this time, as if the reality of the situation was finally sinking in. "What am I looking at?" The agent's eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable. "What you're looking at is the next phase of human evolution. And what's in these files, they have the potential to change everything you think you know about your work, your companies, and even the very fabric of society." Elon felt a chill run down his spine. He'd spent his entire career pushing the boundaries of technology. But this? This was something beyond what he had imagined. It was as if he had unknowingly been part of a much larger game, a game whose stakes were higher than anything he had ever dreamed. The agent continued, his voice steady. "The technology here isn't just about better cars, faster rockets, or more efficient AI. It's about controlling the future itself. And there are forces, powerful, shadowy forces, that want to keep this information hidden. But it's slipping. It's slipping through their fingers." Elon's thoughts began to race. He had always been a pioneer, someone who had taken risks and gone against the grain. But to be tangled in something like this, something that could threaten the very fabric of society, it was overwhelming. "Who are these people?" Elon asked, his voice firm despite the turmoil inside. "What are they after?" The agent hesitated, his gaze shifting toward the door as if making sure they were still alone. Then, in a lower voice, he spoke. "There's a faction within the government, a group of elites who have been working on these technologies for decades. They've kept them hidden, under wraps, using them for purposes that go far beyond innovation. They have their own agenda, control, surveillance, manipulation. And they've made sure that certain pieces of technology, like the ones you're seeing here, don't fall into the wrong hands." Elon's mind raced. "And you want me to help you stop them?" The agent nodded. "Not just stop them. You need to understand, Elon. This isn't just about preventing a few bad actors from getting their hands on advanced tech. It's about preventing the entire world from being locked into a system of control that we can't escape from. They've already infiltrated industries, corporations, even space programs like yours." Elon felt a knot tighten in his stomach. His mind went back to the countless meetings, the late-night brainstorming sessions, the projects he had pushed forward at SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink. What if something he had built, something he had believed in, was being manipulated without his knowledge? "The projects you've worked on, space travel, even electric vehicles, are part of something larger than you ever imagined," the agent continued. "But the more you learn, the more dangerous this becomes. They're watching you. Always have been. And now they're looking for you to either join them, or stop them." Elon's breath hitched as the gravity of the situation started to take root. He was no longer just a businessman. He wasn't just someone who innovated for the sake of progress. He was now part of something far deeper, darker, and more complex. "How do I stop them?" Elon asked, almost to himself, as the words left his lips. The agent's face softened slightly, a rare flicker of something that resembled empathy crossing his features. "You'll need to learn the truth about who's behind this. But we can't do it the traditional way. The truth is buried so deep that even most of the government doesn't know about it. You're going to have to dig, and you'll have to be careful. They've covered their tracks well. And they will come after you if they realize you're on to them." Elon paused, staring at the agent. His entire life had been about tackling seemingly insurmountable challenges. But this? This was something far more dangerous than anything he had ever faced. It wasn't just about building rockets to Mars or sending electric cars into the streets. It was about exposing a dark side of power that could change the course of history, and maybe even his own future. "How do I know I can trust you?" Elon asked, his voice edged with caution. "For all I know, you could be one of them." The agent met his gaze without flinching. "You don't. But if you want to survive this, you'll have to take the risk. Trust is a luxury we don't have right now. All I can offer you is this, the truth. But it's up to you whether you want to uncover it." Elon sat back, running his hands through his hair. He'd always known that the tech industry was full of secrets, of hidden agendas, but this felt like something entirely different. He had faced the possibility of failure in his companies before. He had stared down financial ruin, technological disasters, and personal betrayals. But the stakes now felt more personal. The very thing he had built his entire life around was at risk of being hijacked for purposes he couldn't even fathom. "All right," Elon finally said, his voice determined. "I'll help you. But I need more answers. I need to know what I'm really up against." The agent gave a small nod. "We'll start small. There's a location, an old facility, long abandoned. It holds the first clue in this puzzle. But we can't just walk in. We'll need to plan this carefully. The people we're up against don't take kindly to interference." Elon exhaled slowly. This was only the beginning. But he knew one thing for sure: whatever was coming, it was far bigger than anything he had ever imagined. And he couldn't back out now. The air outside was cool, and the streets were unusually quiet as Elon followed the agent through the back exit of the Secret Service headquarters. He had barely slept since the meeting, his mind spinning with questions, doubts, and an overwhelming sense of foreboding. The more he learned about the forces at play, the more disoriented he became. What had seemed like an ordinary day had quickly turned into something out of a spy thriller. The agent led him to a black SUV parked a few blocks away. It was sleek and unmarked, with tinted windows that made it impossible to see inside. Elon climbed into the passenger seat, his hands gripping the armrest as the car hummed to life and pulled out into the night. There was a strange urgency in the agent's movements, a sense of things rapidly slipping out of control. "We're heading to a facility," the agent said, his tone low, almost conspiratorial. "It's been decommissioned for years, but we believe there's something there, a piece of the puzzle that's been hidden from the public. It's critical we get in and find out what's inside." Elon nodded, not sure what to expect. "And what exactly are we looking for?" The agent glanced at him, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You'll know it when you see it. But trust me, it's not going to be easy. This place has been locked down for a reason. There are security measures in place that we haven't fully figured out." Elon's heart rate quickened. A hidden, decommissioned facility? He had dealt with classified projects before, but this was different. The secrecy surrounding this operation felt suffocating. Every fiber of his being screamed that he was about to uncover something far larger than he could ever have imagined. The SUV took a winding route through the city, avoiding main roads and going through alleyways, as though they were trying to shake off any tail. Elon's mind wandered to the images he had seen earlier, the blueprints, the cryptic notes, and what the agent had said about technology being hidden from the public. It was hard to believe, but the more he learned, the more it seemed like his entire understanding of innovation and progress had been manipulated from the shadows. They arrived at the outskirts of the city in a secluded industrial area. The area was eerily quiet, save for the low hum of machines that had long been abandoned. A tall chain-link fence loomed ahead, covered with overgrown ivy. The facility itself was a massive, blocky structure that appeared old and worn, like something that had been forgotten by time. A feeling of foreboding washed over Elon as he stepped out of the vehicle. The agent gestured toward a small gate on the side of the facility. "This is where it gets tricky. There's a hidden entrance, but it's heavily guarded. We'll need to move quickly." Elon followed the agent, his senses heightened. Every step felt as though it were pulling him deeper into a web of uncertainty. There were no signs of life, no indication that anyone had been in or out of the facility for years. The silence felt unnatural, as though the entire area had been deliberately abandoned, left to rot in the shadows. As they reached the gate, the agent pulled out a set of keys. He worked quickly, his movements deliberate. There was no time to waste. The lock clicked open, and they slipped inside. The interior of the facility was as desolate as the exterior. The floors were littered with dust and debris, and old equipment was scattered throughout. The faint smell of mildew and rust lingered in the air. Elon's eyes darted around, taking in every detail. It felt like a place where secrets were buried, hidden away from the world. "Stay close," the agent whispered. He led Elon down a dimly lit corridor, its walls covered in faded markings and strange symbols that Elon couldn't place. They passed several doors, all sealed shut with heavy chains and locks. "Why is this place so locked down?" Elon asked, trying to break the tension. "What exactly was it used for?" The agent didn't respond right away. Instead, he paused at one door near the end of the hallway. It was different from the others. The metal was newer, and the door had a small window through which Elon could see a dim light flickering inside. The agent ran his fingers along the edge of the door and then motioned for Elon to stand back. He pulled out a small device and slid it into a hidden slot on the doorframe. There was a soft beeping sound, and the door creaked open. Inside, the room was dark, save for the eerie glow of a single monitor in the far corner. Elon's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. The room was filled with strange equipment, machines that looked far ahead of anything he had seen in his own work. There were blueprints and documents scattered across a metal table, and in the center of the room was a massive, complex piece of technology that Elon couldn't immediately identify. "What is this?" Elon asked, stepping closer to the table. His fingers brushed against the papers, and he could immediately tell they were old, decades old, in fact. The text was handwritten in a language that wasn't familiar to him. The agent took a deep breath, his face taut with tension. "This is what we've been looking for." This is one of the first projects they worked on, something that was meant to be buried and never seen again. But it's not just technology. It's a weapon. Elon's pulse quickened. "A weapon? What do you mean?" The agent moved closer, his eyes scanning the documents on the table. "Not a weapon in the traditional sense. It's a form of control, manipulation. The goal was always to stay one step ahead, to have the power to control not just people, but entire systems. With this technology, they could have controlled every aspect of society, communication, transportation, even the very way we think." Elon shook his head in disbelief. "This doesn't make sense. How could something like this be kept hidden for so long?" The agent glanced over his shoulder, as if making sure no one was listening. "Because it was never meant to be found. Whoever was behind this, the faction I told you about, they were working in the shadows, making sure no one ever uncovered it. And that's why you need to understand something, Elon. You can't walk away from this. Once you see what's here, there's no turning back. You're already involved." Elon stared at the complex machinery in the center of the room, his thoughts swirling. This was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. And now, he wasn't just fighting for innovation, he was fighting for control over the future itself. As he reached out to touch the technology, a sudden noise echoed down the hallway, footsteps. Someone else was here. The agent's eyes widened, and he quickly shoved Elon behind a row of crates. "They found us," the agent whispered. "Get ready." The footsteps grew louder, echoing down the narrow corridor, until they stopped just outside the room. Elon's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing. The agent motioned for him to stay silent, pressing his finger to his lips. They crouched low behind the crates, the air thick with tension. Elon's hand instinctively went to his phone, but the agent grabbed his wrist, shaking his head. No phones. They'll track us immediately. We can't afford to make a sound. The door to the room creaked open. Elon could barely make out the silhouettes of two men standing in the doorway. The dim light from the hallway cast long shadows, making them appear larger than life. They were dressed in black tactical gear, the kind of gear Elon had only seen on high-level security personnel, people who meant business. "Clear," one of them muttered. He pushed the door wider, stepping into the room with his colleague following closely behind. Elon held his breath. His fingers tightened around the edge of the crate, his mind desperately trying to come up with a plan. The agent beside him was still, not even breathing too loudly. They both knew the importance of staying hidden in this moment. The two men walked further into the room, not noticing the disturbance behind the crates. One of them was scanning the room, his gaze moving from the walls to the table, where the documents and technology lay exposed. "We're not alone," one of them said in a low voice, almost as if he'd sensed something was off. The second man nodded, but before he could speak, the agent surged into action. He grabbed Elon by the collar and yanked him toward the back of the room, moving with a speed that belied his calm demeanor. The agent pulled out a small, sleek device from his belt and pressed it to the side of the crate. With a soft click, the side of the crate slid open, revealing a hidden passageway behind it. The agent motioned for Elon to move quickly. Elon hesitated for a split second, his mind still trying to process everything. Then, without another word, he ducked into the passage. The agent followed, sealing the opening behind them with a swift move. They were in complete darkness. "Stay quiet," the agent whispered, his breath barely audible. "This tunnel leads to a safe exit, but it's not going to be easy. We need to stay ahead of them." Elon nodded, his senses now fully alert. The walls around them were damp, the ground uneven, and the air thick with the smell of decay. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, twisting and turning, with no clear destination. Every footstep felt like it could be their last. The agent's voice broke the silence once more. "You don't understand the weight of what's happening. Those men, they work for the faction. They've been hunting us for months. And now that they know you're involved." Elon felt a cold wave of realization crash over him. "So it's not just about the technology. It's about me. They want me involved in their plans." The agent nodded, but there was no comfort in his expression. "Exactly. They think you'll help them control it, that your genius can turn it into the perfect tool for their agenda. But that's not the future we're fighting for. The world doesn't need more control, it needs freedom." Elon clenched his fists, his thoughts spinning. He had always known that his work had far-reaching consequences, but this was something he had never expected. A part of him wanted to shut it all out, to forget what he had seen and continue with his life as it was. But another part of him, the part that had driven him to revolutionize the electric car industry, the part that had pushed him to send humans into space, felt a fire burning inside him. The fight wasn't over yet. "Then we'll stop them," Elon said, his voice steady now, determination seeping in. "I won't be a pawn in their game. We'll take them down." The agent looked at him for the first time with something like approval in his eyes. "That's the spirit. But this won't be easy. They've got eyes everywhere, and they won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who stands in their way." The sound of footsteps echoed behind them, faint but growing louder. Elon's stomach churned as he realized they weren't safe yet. "We need to move faster," the agent said urgently, grabbing Elon's arm and pulling him forward. "Stay close. We're almost to the end." They quickened their pace, their footfalls now the only sound in the otherwise silent tunnel. The further they went, the more Elon's mind raced. What would happen when they got to the end? What if they were cornered? How could they escape this nightmare? Finally, after what felt like hours of twisting passages, they reached a large metal door at the end of the tunnel. The agent swiped his ID card on the reader, and the door clicked open. They emerged into a small, unassuming room that looked like an old warehouse. For a moment, it felt like they were back in the world they knew. But the agent's urgency kept them moving. "Take the stairs to the roof," the agent instructed. "It's our only way out." The sound of heavy footsteps was now unmistakable, and Elon could feel the tension building in the pit of his stomach. There was no time for second-guessing. They had to act fast. They rushed up the narrow stairwell, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind them. Elon's legs burned, but he kept moving, focusing on the agent's instructions. They reached the rooftop, and Elon's eyes quickly scanned their surroundings. From this height, the city looked peaceful, unaware of the danger unfolding beneath it. But that peace wouldn't last long. There were more men closing in, and they were running out of time. "We need to get to the chopper," the agent said, pointing to a small helicopter hovering in the distance, waiting to take them to safety. Elon's eyes locked onto the chopper. It was their only shot at escaping the immediate danger. Without another word, they ran for the edge of the building, the sounds of pursuit just moments away. As they reached the edge, Elon glanced back, a thought flashing in his mind. This was no longer about technology. This was about survival. And once they left, there would be no going back. The wind whipped against Elon's face as he and the agent sprinted toward the helicopter, the urgency of the moment pushing them both to their limits. The helicopter hovered just a few feet above the rooftop, its blades cutting through the air with a deafening roar. Elon could hear the faint sound of gunshots in the distance, and his pulse quickened. They were getting closer. Time was running out. The agent made a sharp motion, signaling Elon to follow him as they reached the edge of the rooftop. The helicopter's pilot, a stern-looking man with a headset, gave them a quick nod, and they climbed into the open side of the aircraft without hesitation. The moment they were inside, the helicopter lifted off with a jolt, rising above the city skyline. Elon glanced down, seeing the Secret Service facility shrink beneath them. It felt surreal, as if he were escaping from a nightmare, but the weight of the situation kept him grounded in reality. He was no longer just a businessman or an inventor, he was a target. And the people behind this wanted far more than just technological dominance. The helicopter banked sharply, veering away from the city center as it climbed higher. Elon's mind raced, replaying the events of the past few hours. How had things escalated so quickly? What exactly was the technology they had uncovered, and what role did it play in the bigger picture? The agent seemed to sense Elon's questions. This isn't just about control over systems or technology. What you saw back there was part of a larger plan, a plan to rewrite the very fabric of society. Elon turned toward the agent, his brow furrowed in confusion. But that tech, it was like nothing I've ever seen. How does it rewrite society? What's the connection to the faction? The agent leaned back in his seat, his expression darkening. The faction you've been hearing about? They're not just a group of elite individuals working for power. They are part of a much older, much deeper network that has been operating in the shadows for decades. They've infiltrated every sector: politics, technology, the military. Their goal isn't just global influence, it's total control over human progress. Elon's stomach dropped. Total control? The agent nodded gravely. With that technology, they could manipulate everything. It could control not just communications or transportation, but human consciousness itself. The ability to direct people's thoughts, their desires, even their actions. Think of it like a mental and emotional grid, one that links everyone in a society to a single, all-powerful network. Elon's mind spun at the possibilities. But why me? Why did they want me involved? The agent glanced out of the window, watching the lights of the city recede into the distance. Because they know your mind, your vision. They believe that you're the one who can make the technology work in their favor, someone who can bring their twisted vision of the future into reality. You're not just a genius inventor to them, you're the key. Elon sat in stunned silence. He had built rockets that could carry humans into space, designed electric cars that challenged the status quo, and developed sustainable technologies that could transform entire industries. But this was something else entirely. The fate of the world itself was now in his hands. The pilot's voice cut through his thoughts, jolting him back to the present. "We've got incoming," he said tersely. "I'm going to take evasive maneuvers." Elon's eyes widened as the helicopter suddenly banked hard to the right, throwing them against the side. In the distance, he could make out the dark shapes of two military-grade helicopters heading straight for them, their engines growling as they closed in. "They know where we are," the agent said, gripping the seat to steady himself. "They've tracked us." Elon's mind raced. If they didn't lose them, there was a good chance they wouldn't make it out of this alive. He looked out the window and saw the pursuing helicopters rapidly gaining on them. Their weapons were clearly visible, mounted on the sides, ready to fire. "Can you outrun them?" Elon asked, his voice tense. The pilot didn't answer directly. Instead, he slammed the helicopter into a sharp dive, sending them plummeting toward the ground in a terrifying nosedive. The world spun around Elon as the aircraft descended, weaving through skyscrapers in a desperate bid to avoid detection. The city streets below blurred into streaks of lights, the ground rushing up at them. Elon's stomach churned as the G-forces pushed him into his seat. "We need to get higher," he yelled, his mind working frantically. The higher they were, the more difficult it would be for the enemy helicopters to close the gap. "We don't have the altitude," the pilot shouted back, pulling hard on the control stick to level them out just inches above a row of rooftops. The pursuing helicopters were relentless. Elon could see them through the windows, their searchlights flashing on and off as they tried to lock onto their position. One of the enemy helicopters made a sudden move to flank them, closing the gap and lining up for a shot. The hum of the engines and the whir of the blades filled the air, and Elon could hear his heart pounding in his ears. Then, in a blink of an eye, the agent was out of his seat, reaching for the door. "Get down," he shouted, before ripping open the emergency hatch. Elon's eyes widened as the agent jumped out of the helicopter, plunging into the darkness below. The shock of the move stunned Elon for a moment, but he quickly snapped into action. There was no time to waste. The agent had a plan, and it was up to Elon to follow it. Without thinking, Elon followed the agent's lead, moving to the open hatch. The helicopter's altitude was dropping quickly, and with no other option in sight, Elon jumped. The rush of air hit him instantly as he plummeted toward the city below. The sound of the helicopter's engines grew fainter with every second, and for a terrifying moment, Elon wondered if he was making a huge mistake. But then, just as his mind began to race with doubts, he felt a sudden tug, his parachute deployed. For a split second, everything went still. The world slowed, and Elon was floating, suspended in mid-air. Below him, the city stretched out, a sprawling web of lights. His heart was still pounding, but now it was mixed with adrenaline, a sense of freedom. He glanced up to find the agent already safely descending toward the rooftops below, a dark figure against the city's skyline. With a quick adjustment, Elon followed, gliding toward the safety of the ground, hoping that this escape would lead them to the answers they so desperately needed. The wind howled around Elon as his parachute billowed out, slowing his descent just enough to avoid a catastrophic landing. His heart was racing, every muscle in his body tense with the aftermath of the narrow escape. Below him, the dark outlines of the city's rooftops loomed ever closer. He could see the agent's parachute ahead, guiding him toward a safe landing. His mind was still reeling. The danger they had just narrowly avoided, the stakes of the mission, it was all overwhelming. What was it that made these shadowy forces so determined to control the technology? Why had they gone to such extremes to keep him in the fold? His feet hit the roof with a jarring thud, but the impact was enough to steady his legs. He quickly unbuckled the harness and rolled it up, making sure to keep his movements quick and quiet. The agent was already a few steps ahead, scanning the area with sharp eyes, a practiced ease to his movements. "You good?" the agent asked, his voice calm but urgent. Elon nodded, still catching his breath. "Yeah. Didn't expect things to get this intense." The agent smirked. "This is just the beginning. We need to get to the rendezvous point, and we need to move fast." Elon felt a sense of disbelief. The world he knew, the one with rockets, electric cars, and ambitious plans for the future, had suddenly dissolved into a chaotic, life-or-death struggle. And the person he had trusted to guide him through it was a total stranger, a shadow in his world. But something about the agent's confidence felt reassuring. If there was anyone who could get them out of this alive, it was him. They moved swiftly across the rooftops, their footsteps barely audible against the concrete. The city below seemed oblivious to the storm that had just passed over it. The distant hum of traffic and the glow of streetlights offered no hint of the secret war raging above them. As they reached a narrow alleyway, the agent turned to Elon. "We're headed to an old safe house. It's the only place they won't be able to track us immediately. It's got a clean network, no back doors, no surveillance." Elon raised an eyebrow. "And you trust it?" The agent didn't hesitate. "I trust it more than I trust the government." That made Elon pause. The government. The people who had sworn to protect him. The very people who, it seemed, were now targeting him. The realization sank in slowly, like a cold wave. He had been wrong about so many things. His world had been a carefully curated version of reality. But now, everything had cracked wide open. "Tell me what's going on," Elon said, the question hanging in the air between them. The agent looked around before speaking in a low voice, as though even the walls could be listening. "I'll tell you everything once we're safe. But you need to understand this, those people, the ones after you, they've been planning this for decades. They've infiltrated every major industry, every government body, every institution that holds power. And they've been waiting for someone like you. Someone with your knowledge, your drive, your ability to innovate. They want to use you to make sure the world follows the path they've chosen." Elon shook his head. "But why? Why not just make the tech and use it themselves?" The agent's eyes flickered with a hint of something, anger, fear, maybe both. "Because they can't. The tech is designed to integrate with the human mind. Only someone with your level of expertise could unlock its full potential. It's not about control of resources or markets, it's about control of people. And if they get what they want, humanity will lose its freedom. They'll rewrite reality. They'll control our thoughts, our emotions. Everything." Elon felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had always feared that technology could be used for control, but the idea of it becoming a weapon of mass manipulation, of the entire human race being subjugated to a single mind, was beyond anything he could have ever imagined. "Then we have to stop them," Elon said, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "If they can control minds with this tech, they can turn the world into a nightmare. I won't let that happen." The agent nodded, clearly impressed with the resolve in Elon's voice. "That's why we're doing this. But it's not going to be easy. The faction is powerful, and they'll stop at nothing to get what they want." They reached the entrance to the safe house, a nondescript building in the middle of the city, with only a single, small sign hanging above the door. The agent glanced around, ensuring they weren't being followed, then motioned for Elon to follow him inside. The interior was dimly lit, with metal walls and an air of quiet efficiency. The safe house was clean, utilitarian, and had the distinct feel of something that had been used for high-stakes operations before. It was a far cry from the luxury homes and sleek offices Elon was used to. This was a place of secrecy, of survival. The agent led him down a hallway to a room at the back of the building. Inside, there was a computer setup, its screen glowing with a soft blue light. The agent quickly logged in, his fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. "We need to get the data out of here. We need to expose everything before they can shut us down." Elon watched the screen as the agent pulled up a series of encrypted files. "This is it," the agent muttered under his breath. "This is what they've been hiding." Elon leaned in, reading over the agent's shoulder. The documents on the screen detailed high-level government projects, corporate takeovers, and military-grade technology, all centered around one thing: the manipulation of human consciousness. "They've been working on this for decades," Elon said, his voice barely a whisper. "And now they want me to finish it." The agent glanced at him. "No, you're going to stop them. You're the one who has the power to turn the tables. But we can't do it alone. We need help. We need to take down the faction, one piece at a time." Elon nodded. It was clear now. This wasn't just about stopping a few rogue individuals, it was about taking down an entire system, one built on secrecy, manipulation, and control. And Elon Musk, for all his genius, was about to become the world's last hope. The dim glow from the safehouse computer flickered as Elon stared at the files. His mind churned with the implications of what he was seeing. The depth of the conspiracy was like a web so intricate, each thread connected to powerful individuals and organizations that spanned the globe. Government agencies, tech conglomerates, military contractors, they were all linked to this shadowy faction that had quietly shaped the future for years. But now, with the truth laid bare before him, Elon understood that the fight ahead wasn't just about technology. It was about the very essence of freedom. The agent, his face set in grim determination, pulled up another set of documents. "This is the core of it all. These aren't just files about the tech we saw earlier. They're about control, on a scale you can't even imagine. They've been developing ways to manipulate neural networks, and they've been testing it on people for years." Elon's stomach churned. The files revealed something far more disturbing than mere surveillance or manipulation of information. This wasn't just about controlling access to data, it was about controlling the very thoughts and actions of individuals. The neural manipulation technology was so advanced that it could bypass a person's conscious mind, implanting thoughts, desires, and even memories. "They've already begun testing on volunteers," the agent said, his voice low. "Mostly military personnel, politicians, and high-ranking executives, people with influence. They've been refining the technology, making it more effective. Soon, they'll have the ability to not just manipulate someone's mind, but completely erase free will. People will be nothing more than puppets on strings, and the faction will be the puppeteers." Elon shook his head, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "This is bigger than I ever thought. We can't let them get away with this. But how do we stop something like this? How do you fight a war where your own mind is the battlefield?" The agent turned to face him, his eyes filled with a kind of urgency that only came from someone who had seen the full extent of the danger. "We fight it by exposing them. By tearing down their network, one piece at a time. We have to get this information into the right hands, disrupt their operations, and ensure that the technology never sees the light of day." "But we can't do it alone," Elon said, a realization dawning on him. "We need allies. People in power who have the resources to fight back." The agent nodded. "Exactly. We have to start building a coalition. Not just from the tech world, but from all corners of society. People who won't hesitate to stand up for the truth. We need those who are willing to fight for a future that doesn't involve mind control." Elon's mind was already turning. He knew the tech industry, yes, but he also had connections in other places, people who could help, who could be convinced that this fight was worth it. He thought of his colleagues, the engineers, the leaders in innovation who had always pushed the boundaries of what was possible. It would take every ounce of their expertise, but together, they could make a stand. "There's one more thing we need to figure out," the agent said, interrupting Elon's thoughts. "The faction's main base of operations. We've been able to trace most of their activities to a high-security compound in the mountains, but it's heavily guarded. We can't just walk in there, not with the military backing them up." Elon narrowed his eyes, his mind already working through the problem. "We need a plan. A way to get inside, expose their operations, and make sure the world knows what they've been up to. But it's got to be quick. The longer we wait, the more time they have to cover their tracks." The agent smiled grimly. "I was hoping you'd say that. I've got a few ideas. But we're going to need some help, and we're going to need a distraction." Elon leaned forward, his mind focused. "Who do we need?" "A hacker," the agent said. "Someone who can get us past their firewalls, disable their surveillance, and make sure we can get in and out without being detected. And we'll need someone on the inside, someone who can help us navigate the compound once we're in." Elon's thoughts immediately went to one person, Alice, a brilliant cybersecurity expert and a former colleague from one of his early ventures. She had always been ahead of her time when it came to understanding how to exploit systems and protect data. If anyone could crack the security of the compound, it was her. "Alice," Elon muttered. "I know someone who can help." The agent raised an eyebrow. "Good. But we're going to need more than just her skills. We're going to need access to the right resources, air support, weapons, and the element of surprise." Elon stood up, determination flooding through him. "Let's do it. I'll make the call." As Elon stepped away to reach out to Alice, the weight of the mission began to sink in. This wasn't just about stopping a corrupt faction or taking down a powerful organization. It was about saving the future of humanity from falling into the hands of those who sought to control it. He couldn't do it alone, but he wasn't alone anymore. An hour later, Elon was sitting at a table in the safe house, a burner phone pressed to his ear. The line rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Elon? What the hell is going on? You're all over the news, there's talk of military units being mobilized, and everyone's saying you've gone rogue." Elon smiled, despite the gravity of the situation. "Alice, I wish it were that simple. I need your help. I'm in a fight for the future, and I'm going to need everything you've got." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Then Alice spoke, her voice steady and clear. "I'm in. Tell me what you need. We need to break into a secure facility. Military-grade security. High-tech firewalls. We need you to get us in, disable their systems, and cover our tracks." Alice didn't hesitate. "Consider it done. Just give me a location and a time, and I'll be there." Elon felt a sense of relief. They had their hacker, now they needed to assemble the rest of their team. The pieces were falling into place, and soon, they would have everything they needed to take down the faction and expose the truth. But the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles, forces far beyond what he had ever imagined. And the deeper they went into this fight, the more they would risk. But Elon Musk wasn't the type to back down from a challenge. He had fought for space, for clean energy, and now, he was about to fight for the future of the human race. And he wasn't about to let anyone take that away. The night had settled in with an eerie calmness, a deceptive quiet that cloaked the urgency of the mission ahead. Elon stood on the balcony of the safe house, gazing out at the city below. It was a strange feeling, knowing that just beyond the borders of this city lay an enemy so powerful, so hidden, that even the brightest minds hadn't seen it coming. The tech world, the governments, and every institution he had ever known had been manipulated into compliance, and now, it was up to him and his ragtag team to expose the truth before it was too late. Alice had agreed to join them, and her hacker skills were already at work. She'd found a way to bypass their military-grade firewalls, and now, it was all about getting to the heart of the compound. But there was one thing they hadn't figured out yet: how to get past the heavily armed security and military presence. Without that, no matter how good their tech was, they wouldn't stand a chance. Elon's mind raced with possible solutions. But every idea came with risks, too many unknowns, too much at stake. The agent, who had been with him since this entire mess began, was still putting together their exit strategy, making sure they'd have a way to escape once they had the data. But even with the best plans, there were no guarantees. "Hey," a voice broke through his thoughts, and Elon turned to see the agent standing in the doorway. "We've got everything lined up. The extraction team is in place. Alice is setting up the hack, and we're ready for the next phase." Elon nodded. "We need to move fast. We can't afford any slip-ups." The agent gave a sharp nod. "Agreed. But there's one more thing we need to discuss." Elon raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "There's a mole," the agent said, his tone serious. "One of us is compromised. I've been getting strange signals, encrypted messages being routed through their systems. We don't know who it is yet, but there's someone in our ranks feeding them information." Elon's blood ran cold. A mole. Someone they trusted, working against them. "Who?" Elon demanded. "Do you have any idea who it might be?" The agent shook his head. "Not yet. But we can't ignore it. We'll have to be careful who we trust during this operation. If we're not careful, this could be our undoing." Elon's thoughts flashed to everyone they'd been working with so far: his colleagues, the agents, Alice, even the people at the safe house. Who could it be? And worse, who could have planted them? Was it someone they had overlooked, or was it part of a deeper plan to sabotage their efforts? "We'll deal with that later," Elon said, his voice tight. "For now, we move forward. We get the data, we expose the truth, and we make sure this never happens again." The agent nodded, but Elon could tell that the mole situation was weighing heavily on his mind. There was no time to waste, though. This mission was bigger than any one person. It was bigger than all of them. It was about the future of humanity, and it couldn't be derailed by doubts or paranoia. The plan was simple but dangerous: infiltrate the compound, steal the data, and make sure the world knew what was really going on. No more lies, no more manipulation. They would expose the truth, no matter the cost. The operation began under the cover of darkness, just as they had planned. Elon, the agent, and their small team moved swiftly through the city, avoiding security cameras and military patrols as they made their way to the compound. Alice, back at the safe house, was working tirelessly to keep the system's defenses offline. Each moment counted. As they neared the perimeter of the compound, the weight of the mission hit Elon once again. This was it. No turning back. They crouched low behind a series of containers, waiting for the signal from Alice. The agent checked his watch. The moment they were waiting for had arrived. "Now," the agent whispered. The group moved as one, darting toward the compound's outer wall. Elon's pulse quickened as he followed the agent, every sense alert. The closer they got to the walls, the more real it felt. They weren't just up against a powerful organization, they were up against the future itself, a future that had been designed to keep humanity in line. They reached the entrance, and the agent tapped in a code on a hidden panel. There was a brief pause before the door opened, revealing the darkness inside. They slipped in without a sound. Inside the compound was a maze of halls and corridors, guarded by armed soldiers at every turn. But with Alice's help, they moved undetected. The military's high-tech surveillance systems had been shut down, and they were able to avoid the main security checkpoints. The deeper they went, the more they realized just how massive the operation was. The compound wasn't just a place for research, it was a command center for the faction's plans to control the future. They passed rooms filled with servers, research data, and armed guards, each one more menacing than the last. Elon's mind raced as they approached the central data hub. The room was guarded by 2 heavily armed soldiers. The agent nodded to Elon, signaling him to stay back. They needed a distraction. In a swift move, the agent threw a smoke grenade, enveloping the room in a thick, choking cloud. The soldiers scrambled, disoriented. It was enough time for the agent to neutralize them, and in seconds, they were in. The data hub was a cold, sterile room, humming with the sound of machines. Elon's eyes locked onto the main terminal at the far end of the room. There it was, everything they needed. The evidence that would bring the faction to its knees. Alice's voice came through the earpiece. "I'm in. I've got control of the system. You've got 10 minutes before they realize we're inside. Get what you need and get out." Elon walked to the terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Files began downloading, everything from government documents to corporate conspiracies, all the damning evidence they needed to expose the truth. But just as the final file downloaded, a loud alarm blared through the compound. Red lights flashed, and the sound of boots on the ground echoed in the hallway. "Elon, we've got company," the agent's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Time's up. Get to the extraction point now." Elon grabbed the external drive, shoving it into his jacket pocket. They weren't done yet, but they had what they came for. Now, they just had to get out alive. The agent led the way, and the team sprinted down the halls, dodging soldiers and security forces. They were so close to freedom, but the compound was on lockdown, and the odds were narrowing. Finally, they reached the extraction point. A helicopter was waiting, blades already spinning. Elon jumped in, heart racing as the helicopter ascended into the night sky. Behind them, the compound grew smaller and smaller, the flames of chaos lighting up the darkness. They had done it. They had exposed the truth, and now the world would know what had been hidden for so long. But as the helicopter disappeared into the night, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning.